We are going to continue to discuss the confidence intervals. But in this discussion, we will discuss the confidence interval and the sample size of the proportion. So there is now proportion. For example, usually the presentation of the survey, for example, the survey for the president is in the form of proportion. For example, 72% of the Filipino are satisfied in the administration of Duterte. That is just for example. So 72% of the Filipino. So in other words, there is a percentage of the Filipino who are satisfied in the administration of Duterte. So mostly the presentation survey is in terms of the proportion or percentage. Now, how we are going to solve the confidence interval if the given is not the mean but the proportion of the sample? Okay, before we're going to discuss the proportion, getting the confidence interval of the proportion, first we are going to discuss the symbol used for the proportion notation. P, the small letter P, stands for population proportion. And this this symbol, okay, this symbol, this is to be read as this is to be read as P hat, hat as in HAT, kalo. So P hat stands for the sample proportion. For the sample proportion, P hat is equal to X all over N. So X is the number of the data being described in the problem. N is the sample size. For example, mm, for example, 40 men out of 100 population. Okay, so X there is the 40. So I'll repeat, X is the uh, number of the subject. And then Q hat has the formula of 1 minus P hat. So where X is the number of subject poses, the characteristic of interest, and N is the sample size. For example, in the recent survey of 150 households, 54 had central air conditioning. Find P hat and Q hat, where P hat is the proportion of households that have central air conditioning. So yung mga merong central air conditioning sa bahay, mayayaman. So this is just for example. So for our solution, the value of X is 54 and the sample size is 150. So using the formula, P hat is equal to X X divided by N. So we have 54 divided by 150, which is equal to 0.36. Or it means to say that 36% of the households has central air conditioning. So yung 0.36 can be represented also in terms of percentage. So that is 36%. Therefore, the difference between 1 and 0.36 is 64. In other words, if we are going to add these two numbers, this is equal to 1. Okay, so those households who don't have central air conditioning has the percentage of 64%. So out of 150, 64% or 64% of the household do not have central air conditioning. So very easy. Another example. Okay. Um, Confidence interval for the proportion. That is just, by the way, the example for the P hat and the Q hat. So for us to identify or to solve the confidence interval for the proportion, then we are going to follow this formula. So the population proportion is greater than the P hat or the proportion of the sample minus the Z. In this case, Z, because we're going to use the concept of uh, N is greater than or equal to 30. So the Z, specific alpha, or specific confidence interval divided by 2, times the square root of P hat times Q hat all over N, which is less than the P hat plus Z score of specific confidence interval divided by 2 times the square root of P hat times Q hat all over N. So that this is the formula. Now, the product of N times P hat and N times Q hat. So if we are going to multiply N and P hat or N and Q hat, the product of those number should be greater than or equal to 5. Okay, so this formula is very specific. Okay, we can only use this formula if the product of the sample size and the Q hat or the sample size and the P hat, okay, is greater than or equal to 5. If the product of the two quantities is not greater than 5 or not equal to 5, then we could not use the formula. Okay, for example, a sample of 500 nursing applications included 60 from men. Find the 90% confidence interval of the true proportion of men who applied to the nursing program. So, ayun, may nursing application. Pero they only identify 60 men. So in other words, out from 500 nursing applications, meron pang ibang lalaki na kumuha application for nursing. Hindi lang 60, greater than 60. So, the problem is that we have to identify the 90% confidence interval of the two proportion of men. So, ilan ba talaga ang lalaki out from 500 nursing applications? So, for our solution, we have to identify the X. X is 60 kasi lalaki. And then N is 500. For the P hat, we have X over N. So 60 over 500 is equal to 0.12 or 12%. So 60 is just 12% of the 500 nursing application. Okay, 60 men is 12% on 500 nursing applications. And P hat, okay, the difference between 1 and the P hat is our Q hat, which is 0.88. So if we are going to add these two numbers, the answer is 1. So we already have the N, the P hat, and the Q hat. Then we can now substitute our formula. By the way, the Z score of the specific confidence interval, which is 90% confidence interval, is 1.65. Just to remind you that this Z score is taken from the previous table that I gave you, yung normal distribution. So what you're going to do, okay, you have 90% confidence interval. Therefore, there is a remaining 10% of the confidence interval. So 10, 0.10 divided by 2, and then 1 minus that number, locate that one in the table, then you get 1.65. We already discussed how to identify the z of the specific confidence interval. Now, we can now substitute to the formula. So our proportion of the population for men, and then we have the proportion of the sample, the z-score, the p-hat, the q-hat, and the sample size. So substitute the formula, substitute the variables to the point, the point, to this one, the p-hat, minus the z-score to this one from the table of the normal distribution. The p-hat, so 0.12 times the q-hat, 0.88 divided by 500. By the way, this is not subtraction, another typographical error. This is plus. So take note, please. This is not subtraction, but this is addition. So this is plus sign. Okay. So if you input that in your calculator, the answer should be, so this one, 0.096. Okay, P is less than 9.6% or 0.096. But P is greater than P is less than 0.145. Okay, I repeat, P is greater than 0.096 but less than 0.145, or P is greater than 9.6% or P is greater than 9.6% but less than 14.5%. Okay, so this is now our confidence interval of the true proportion of men who applied for nursing. So between 9.6% and 14.5%. So konti lang talaga ang lalaking nag-apply ng nursing sa ating example. Okay. Another example, a survey of 1,721 people found that 15.9% of individuals purchase religious books at the Christian bookstore. Find the 95% confidence interval of the true proportion of people who purchase their religious books at a Christian bookstore. So as we can see here, we have N is 1,721, which is our sample. Okay. And then our P hat is 15.9%. Okay. So here, 15.9% is already, the P hat is already given. So if we convert the 15.9% into decimal, and we have 0.159. We have to move the decimal 2 steps going to the right. Therefore, if this would be our P hat, our Q hat is this one, 0.841. And since it is 95% confidence interval, so we have the confidence level of 95%, our Z is 1.96. Okay. We already have our data to be substituted in our formula rather. So the formula, okay, and then we will going to substitute Okay, the P is 0.159 minus the Z is 1.96 times the square root of the product, P hat, 0.159 times 0.841 by N. So that one. Same here, but the operation is addition. So substitute. Again, typographical error. This is plus sign. Okay, I repeat, this is plus sign. Now, if you input it in your calculator, then we have this answer. So, the percentage of the population who purchased religious books at a Christian bookstore is between 0.142 and 0.176, or the proportion of the individual who purchase religious books at a Christian store or Christian is between 14.2% and 17.6%. And that ends our presentation.